This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
The people in this crowd will soon be among almost 40,000 who have seen a new science fiction movie at North Park Cinema 2. The movie is called Star Wars.
So what we thought we'd do is take another look at Star Wars, which just now broke the United States box office record, which was once held by Gone with the Wind and then by Jaws. And for many people, that'll be another chance to see those two wonderful non-human friends of ours, the robots R2-D2 and C-3PO. And what's the meaning of it all? Who knows and who cares? Star Wars became the new box office champion by providing pure 100% escapist entertainment. It's one of those rare movies that seems to play to every sort of audience, Gene, and bring out the kid in all of us.
You know, I've seen the picture 3 times, and that sequence more than that. And every time I see that little fighting sequence, I think I figured out the secret of at least that chunk of the movie, and that is, that looks exactly like what happens at a pinball game that kids love. We're seeing things blow up, and I think the way this movie is shot different ways, quick action like that, it's like you're putting every person as a pinball player who walks into the theater.
Maybe that's why people can see it a dozen times or 2 dozen times, because it doesn't matter that you know the story. You still have the sound and light, the effects, the explosions, the dogfight in outer space. It's just a never-ending visual delight. I think it's a movie that will last for years.
And finally this evening, if you don't know what a 100-year-old Wookiee is, he or it is seen here on the left, chances are you're going to find out.
The film is breaking attendance records all over the country. Not since Jaws have so many people stood in line to see a movie.
This is James Arnold Taylor, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi. I have a good feeling about this.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee, he is new, a brand new guest to Coffee with Kenobi, but he is a veteran podcaster. He is one of the co-hosts of the Hyperion Hub. Please welcome John Redlingshafer. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
You know, this is terrific. Of course, I've had John Alois and Sean Degenhardt on, but you're the secret sauce of that show. We all know that.
Well, let's just hope nobody finds out. But, you know, between you and me, there's got to be glue. There's got to be show glue, and I keep it together.
That's right. Well, hopefully you can do that for this show as well. John is on the show because we've got, if you are a fan of sports, and I know a lot of you listening are sports fans, there is a person named Shohei Ohtani, and he is this unicorn. He's very unique in the world of baseball because he can pitch and he can hit, and he's excellent at both. In many ways, he surpasses Babe Ruth. John is our Star Wars unicorn because John has just now, not just now, but recently in the past few months, saw the original Star Wars: A New Hope for the very first time. And John, you and I are probably in a similar age bracket, I would guess.
Yeah, I'll just be honest. I was born in 1979. And so, yes, you are talking to a 44-year-old who just now saw episode 4 for the very first time.
And that is so exciting because you don't have all of these, and I say baggage, but it's not baggage. It's you know, Star Wars has been such a great thing to so many people. But it's not like you're immune to the appeal of fantasy and entertainment. I mean, you were a lifelong Disney fan. Let's talk about that first. Talk about sort of your love affair with Disney and how that was cultivated.
Well, as a young kid, I mean, there was always the Mickey Mouse cartoon on television, and that blossomed and nurtured thanks to my parents taking us, to trips down to Florida multiple times. And over the years, you become more enthralled with what the messaging is and what the themes and the stories. And over the years, you then become a parent. And so for the last decade, we've been going on regular trips to various Disney properties. And that culminated a couple of years ago with a couple of dear friends who said, let's start a podcast on Disney. So I've summarized those 44 years very quickly, but I have to tell you, it started at a young age. It was nurtured by my parents. It was then nurtured by my family, my extended family, my wife, my children, and now a network of friends, including you, that there was really one missing piece to the Disney crown, so to speak, that I never really dabbled in. And I don't have a good excuse, but here we are today.
Sure. Well, no, I don't think you need an excuse. I think it's fascinating to kind of peel back the layers. We'll be like sociological archaeologist. That's a good Lucasfilm term to use. I know you're a big fan of the Indiana Jones films because I'm a loyal listener of the Hyperion Hub, and I loved the three of you breaking down that series. But when you were growing up, you obviously went to movies. What were some of the movies that you liked as a kid? Because undoubtedly you'd heard of Star Wars, but for whatever reason, you and or your friends just didn't go to see it.
You know, the first Star Wars related memory I have was it being on in the background at my babysitter's house. But we were in another room playing Atari. And I heard it in the background, but that was it. So growing up, what did I go see? E.T. I went to see Hoosiers. I saw a blend of sports and some extraterrestrial related, fantasy related, space related things. My mom is, to this day, I'm sure she would agree, is a Trekkie. So I'm not immune to the realm of outer space, and I absolutely love Avatar. And so those were some of the basics. I mean, other than your Disney, animated cartoons and movies like that. But really, it just, I don't know, maybe it was my age in that it comes out in 77. I'm a little, I'm not even born yet. And then, the other ones come out, the first three come out as I'm still kind of growing and don't know any better. And by then, who knows? Life had just started and it never was on my radar.
So it kind of makes sense. You're almost born at the perfect time. Like if your parents weren't fans. So Return of the Jedi came out in 83. You said you were born in 79. So you're probably 3 or 4 years old when it came out, and you're not going to rush out to see Return of the Jedi at that age. E.T. was probably you were 7 or 8 years old.
That's right.
And by then, Star Wars was this wonderful memory. But unless you had it on Betamax, which I still do, or VHS, it probably wasn't something that was cultivated. Now, when you were in grade school and high school, surely people would talk about Star Wars or the franchise. Do you kind of remember? It's kind of a stretch. Do you kind of remember sort of like, yeah, I missed that, whatever, I'm going to move on to the other thing? Or how did that kind of work? It's really fascinating to me.
I love that this is fascinating to you because it's I can't lie. It's the story here.
Yes.
But there were phrases, there were references, and being a grade schooler into high school, sometimes you just kind of along with the group because it wasn't everyday conversation, but you would you'd hear something about the Force, or I've got a bad feeling about this, but I didn't understand it. I didn't grasp it. My friends would have some of the toys, and I would see those, and I didn't want to seem out of the loop and say, so what is this? Whose is this? Who's this? And I would just kind of say, playing with toys, you can pretty much play shoot games and shoot them up and fly around the room and without really knowing much of anything. So I put on a charade. I don't know, a facade, so to speak, but in the end, I had heard plenty about it, but just never was able to put all the pieces together until about April of this year.
Isn't that fascinating? Because for so many of us who were big fans, I remember playing Star Wars action figures or G.I. Joe action figures in like 6th, 7th, 8th grade in the classroom, and remember thinking, I probably look like a nerd. And at the time, I would have been so embarrassed by that. Now, of course, I've kind of built my life around it to some degree. So that's funny. But you felt like, hey, if I'm not fully aware of this, I don't want to stand out. What an interesting phenomenon that is.
Well, and again, it's society. It's maybe social pressures. I grew up in a great town with a lot of great people. It's nothing against them. It's just I didn't want to, like you said, I didn't want to stand out. So at some point, I knew I was going to probably get called out on it. I just didn't know when.
I think that's so cool. I really appreciate your honesty here for this too. So again, you're a big Disney fan. I know you bring your family to the parks. You've got a wonderful encyclopedic knowledge of Walt Disney himself, Walter Elias Disney, and everything that he brings to the table. So it's, I believe it happened in, was it 2014, 2015, news breaks that the Walt Disney Corporation has purchased Lucasfilm, including Star Wars, and they're going to make a brand new trilogy. Honestly, John, even saying this, the goosebumps are all over. I remember that was like my reverse Kennedy assassination moment. I remember it so perfectly. I was so excited. I was sitting at the kitchen table and my family was sitting around, and I stood up from my chair and I announced it, you would have thought I won the World Cup. Like I kicked I was Lionel Messi in fandom, I guess. That doesn't even make sense. And so excited. What was it like for you as a Disney fan when you first heard that Lucasfilm was being purchased by Disney?
I didn't feel like I'd won the World Cup. However, I can tell you that as the owner of a whopping 20 to 30 shares of the Walt Disney Company, I went, hey, that's probably a really good idea. I know there is, we all probably, I know for a fact, I would underestimate the universe of fandom at issue, but I thought that's a brilliant business investment. And I never denied that. I reiterated to close friends that, I don't know much, but I'm sure they're going to take this intellectual property and this franchise and Disneyfy it. When I was a kid, another popular group or film or entity in my life was Jim Henson and the Muppets. Sure. And I saw, when Jim got sick, first name basis, when Mr. Henson got sick, who did he go and turn to carry on the legacy? And I thought the exact same thing. So it wasn't a warm, fuzzy feeling, but I thought shrewd business move, because I know that if you I don't know if it's even a verb, you Disneyfy something, I know you're going to protect it. And you're going to also invest in a way that doesn't drag the franchise down. It actually promotes it and expands ever so cautiously. Little did I know what Disney Plus would do to that, and confuse those of us that didn't watch everything and just hear more and more about all these new franchises coming out. But that just proves my point, that they are good at not only keeping the history, but building on it.
Well, very well said. Again, this is why you're the podcaster that you are. And I love how you're explaining things. So it was a good investment. I remember thinking, look, at that time, Lucasfilm was just making basically Star Wars parodies. The books were great. There was a resurgence of action figures and toys in the mid 90s, and books started getting back onto shelves. I remember thinking, this is the adrenaline jolt that they need, because I know what Disney can do with an intellectual property and all the intellectual properties they've created and fostered and nurtured over the 100 plus years. I always found the fact that it was Disney's 100th a little bit of a generous stretch of time, but it sells coffee. So, and we've talked about that before. The great thing about this is that they told new stories. But before you get to new stories, you had mentioned it can be quite daunting, because Star Wars has got a very rich tapestry, a huge, massive mythology. Where do you go? Where do you follow? And then we circle around to our dear friends, John and Sean, who are massive Star Wars fans. I've had both of their two of their kids in my class, of course, where I use Star Wars to teach mythology, among other things. And you hadn't seen it, but it was kind of a running joke, all in good fun, throughout this. What was finally the thing that made you realize, all right, I'm going to watch this crazy space opera?
Well, it's a combination of a couple of things. First and foremost, again, I go back to the idea of, do you want to be left out forever? And to watch, and I have dear friends outside of the Hub podcast world and you that are just huge fans. And yes. I've got 4 kids. We're busy. I get it. We're all busy as a society, but I'm going, you know what? I don't know when the time is. I don't know if I'm ever going to watch every single one, get to The Mandalorian, get to all these other Disney Plus things, but I owe it not only to the people I know who show their passion, I owe it to myself to see what I am missing. I owe it to myself as a student, as a parent, as a Disney fan, a Disney file, to really just see, all right, 1977, I know the graphics aren't going to be crazy good, but I think there's going to be a lot of things that make a lot more sense. And I know I'm just scratching the surface, but there's going to be a lot more that I can appreciate as a colleague, as a friend, as a parent, by at least watching the first one and see where it goes.
Well, and fair to say, because it was such a massive impact on the cultural zeitgeist, and you're a fan of popular culture. And you thought, this is a little bit of a hole in my resume. I'm going to do it. So let's set the stage.
Okay.
So was it like something you just kind of casually said, all right, I'm going to watch it now, what the heck? Or was it like planned out in advance? How did it kind of play out for us?
Well, I was challenged by my dear friends on the Hyperion Hub podcast to watch at least one of them by March 31st. I failed miserably. Winter. My daughter had a very successful basketball season. That gets us into the end of February, and then March. And then softball starts, so I'm going to start going to games, and my son's track season, and then my daughter's track season. Yeah, I could go on and on. There was always
a very busy family, very active family.
I'm very blessed, and so I saw a commercial that the Sci-Fi Channel. Don't judge me, I didn't go to Disney Plus, but here I was on flipping through, and all of a sudden we're going to show all three this weekend. So I just hit record. I just hit record. I can't even tell you the date it was. And they were just sitting there staring me in the face every time I went onto the DVR.
Oh, it's like homework, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I have those programs on mine still.
Yeah. So you're going, all right, that's 2 hours. And I'm doing the math and I'm going, when am I going to do this? Well, sure enough, the sports one weekend got rained out. And I'm sitting there and I have a stack of work that I could do for my job. Couple of things on the honey-do list I could do. Just thunder and lightning. And I thought, you know what? Go grab a Coke Zero, sit down. I'm going to do it. And I had a little pad of paper. And my little legal pad. I started scribbling notes, and then I stopped. About a half hour in, I said, don't do this. This isn't homework, as you were alluding to. Just sit back and absorb. And so, yeah, I took some notes. I did take some notes on poignant moments, just because I didn't want to forget, thinking that there may be some folks who want to hear this story. But in the end, I did. I just sat back, and when I'm going to watch episode 5, no clue. But I've got one down, and that's a heck of an accomplishment after 40 some years.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Good for you. And I'm really impressed with that, the fact that you started, because you're a scholar and you want to, writing things down helps us to learn and think about, and you decide, I'm just going to enjoy this. Mm-hmm. So, of course, the question all of my listeners are thinking, well, what'd you think? It's okay if it was. Maybe this will alleviate some of your concerns. I think we've talked about this off the air on a few occasions. When my students walk into my classroom, if they don't really know me, or even if they do, there's a general concern that if they're not super knowledgeable, or if they're not massive fans, that I'm going to be upset or disappointed. Look, my wife is, my everything, and she doesn't get it. She's glad that I love it. It's afforded me and my family a lot of amazing opportunities. We're very blessed, and she's had some fun. But at the end of the day, she's not a fan. And I say that to myself, it's okay if you don't like it. I just want you to think. I just want you to look at things differently. So tell me what you thought.
Well, there's a whole bunch of words that I could use, and I'm not, and I don't want to sound like
it's a family show.
Well, then I'll keep that in mind. But at no point did I think this was a penance. This wasn't an act of contrition. It wasn't the homework.
Sure.
The word that came to mind was relief, that I wasn't disappointed. I was able to put some of the pieces together. And I can honestly say that at the end of this episode, I thought, well, there's a lot more I need to learn. And that tells me internally, subconsciously, that I do want to see subsequent episodes. So I'm not saying it for show or anything of the like. It was fulfilling. It was, it was 1970s. I get it. And I learned that I watched a remastered version with Jabba, in it.
Sure.
And so I did learn that from you guys in talking with you. But all in all, it was fun. It was fun to watch, and really, like I said, I think have so much of my life and references that I never got to flash in front of me. The best example I can give is when we learn when Luke is told that his father was the best starfighter pilot. When I go, well, anybody who's not a true unicorn knows a particular phrase that goes about whose father's who here. But I thought, lights, red flags. Wait, okay, all right, this is good. This is good. And so we learned so early that this is a big deal. Who's his dad? And I knew that just because of pop culture, but there again, I can't say enough how it does. It whets the appetite to start putting more of the pieces together. I've seen Tatooine shirts all over Disney World for years, and to now know what that is, where that is, it's kind of fun to really appreciate that we've just scratched the surface.
This makes me very happy. So
good. Is that why you had me on?
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons. I knew you would make me happy because I always enjoy listening to you and chatting with you. No, I think it's cool that you were open-minded, and I know what you mean. Like, there are so many things that are labeled like great or iconic or, a must-see, must-do, whatever. And there's that part of you, if you're sort of late to the party. Like, I didn't see Hamilton until like a year and a half after it was out. It wasn't because I didn't want to. That show was ridiculously, insanely, well-deservedly popular. When I finally saw it, for the first 10 seconds, I thought, oh my gosh, this is what they say. Now, I'm not saying the original Star Wars is Hamilton necessarily, but, the numbers are pretty solid. So it's cool that I love that you said the word relief, because as well as I do, like if it doesn't meet your expectations, then this fan albatross that you've had, for right or wrong, just because of the way the world works and stuff like that and pop culture, etc. It worked for you. Are there key characters that stood out? Of course, Luke, Leia, Han Solo, Darth Vader, Stormtroopers. I mean, you know that. Everybody knows that. If you've ever been down a grocery store aisle in Walmart, these people, these characters. But who kind of worked for you and stood out to you?
Well, when you see, I've always heard of C-3PO and R2-D2, but when you see them interact so early, and it takes me back to, and you judge me if you will, I know you won't, my grandmother and my grandfather, they walk and they interact. One of them doesn't even speak English, and you just know from the tone that he's going, you whatever, fill in the blank. I watched my grandparents interact like that. And so there is this Archie and Edith feeling, and I could be way off. I'm sure they have been overanalyzed back and forth, but I just love the almost comedic interlude that they provide in some of the most high tense situations. And of course, Harrison Ford as the skeptic hothead pilot. Yeah, he's great. I loved Carrie Fisher from the Blues Brothers.
Yes.
3 years after Curl Up and Die. Who wouldn't want to own a shop called that for all your hair care needs? So I owed it to not just friends, but Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, John Williams. My goodness, the music. I had heard it my whole life, but to see how the characters are built up, and how certain scenes, the culmination of certain scenes, just with an overlay of some of the best music that's ever been written. And I say that about all of his works. But, honestly, and this sounds maybe kind of odd, the one character that I really focused on the most was Vader himself. And there was a lot of cultural things that stuck out to me as a 44-year-old that probably wouldn't have as a young kid. You have Han saying hokey or sorcery or things about the Force, a big skeptic. You know who wasn't? The bad guy.
Yeah.
There's respect, and I don't need to tell you that, but there's respect. There's respect for what it is, whether you believe in it or not. And he went to his superiors, and you could tell there were skeptics there too. No, if you're a pure believer, and I thought that was very interesting that something so sci-fi and technical and mechanical still had almost a religious overtone at times.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful. There's a wonderful reverence that's sort of imparted throughout the, so I've been talking about Star Wars since I was 5 years old. I've written books. I've done this podcast 10 years. I've never thought about that before. You just taught me something about Star Wars.
Yeah, great.
I think that's cool.
And even C-3PO at some point makes the comment, I wrote it down, thanking the maker. Thank the maker. Now, that can mean someone who built him. That can mean a much broader picture, but the cute or cute, I guess, is a word that describes it. But what you can infer from that is, take a moment, thank the maker, whomever your maker is. I'm not here to sway you one way or the other, or any way whatsoever. But just thank them for what you have and who you are.
I love that. Yeah, so there's a couple of things that I think you'll appreciate. For one thing, George, the R2D2 and C3PO were supposed to be comedic relief. You're supposed to kind of enjoy the Star Wars story through their eyes, like they are the tellers of the tale. I'm sure you've heard that before.
Mm-hmm.
It's based on some of the Kurosawa Japanese films. There's some characters that have similar R2D2 and C3PO qualities about them, and they are the comedic relief. So I'm glad that you caught that. And then George, the Force has evolved naturally throughout the history of the mythology, but it's a combination of several different religious philosophies and belief systems. Certainly Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey, which I know you've heard about, taps into a lot of those ideas. So it's pretty neat that without a ton of experience per se, those things still stand out, which means it's a story well told. And I'm sure that you would absolutely agree with that.
I do. And I think, again, if something can hold the test of time, we're pushing almost 50 years here in a few years. Mm-hmm. And again, graphics and all the production value stuff aside, it works. It still works. It is what it is. But yes, it still holds water. And that's a big deal for a movie 50 years later. Hearing the Cantina music obviously piqued my interest, but the line while they're all in there together of "We don't serve your kind here."
Mm-hmm.
And I say this with all sincerity, I'm appalled that we still hear that in society.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
And I'm appalled that in whatever year this is supposed to be into the future, we still haven't advanced past that. And so I think there are messages built in there, like I said earlier, that a 44-year-old is going to pick up on that, maybe a laugh off to a kid. We don't serve your kind. Ha ha ha. But man, like you said, there's some messaging there that it goes a lot deeper than just, guys fighting with swords and guns. Let's put it that way. And by the way, I now appreciate all the memes where I now appreciate all the memes where stormtroopers are labeled as horrible shots. My goodness, I'm a James Bond fan, and I know all of his enemies with Spectre are bad shots, but goodness gracious, stormtroopers are terrible shots.
Right. Well, you're not wrong about that. Whenever my students say it, I say, well, if they were good shots, this would be a 5-minute movie.
Fair enough. And as would Dr. No. But anyway, yes.
That's right. That's exactly right. I that was playing at the Normal Theater recently in some of the older James Bond films.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, back to Star Wars. Yeah, that's really fascinating to me. There are a lot of messages, and I do point that out. Look, but just like X-Men is a comic book series in a film franchise with various degrees of success, and that's very much about racism or being different. There's an example of segregation. It's just about droids, but this is during the 70s. Star Wars, of course, was created with a backdrop of the Vietnam conflict, and racial tension are still very much a thing. Discrimination is still very much a thing. These are all things we know. This isn't a political thing. This is just history.
Right.
It's just history.
And that's what I study.
It still exists.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite quotes, from Mark Twain is, "True. He likes fiction better than truth because fiction is obliged to tell the truth." You can tell a lot through a fictional story because it helps people break down barriers that they subconsciously or consciously have, and they hear a story. And if they open up their minds to it and think about it, creative thinking, intellectual honesty, then you've got some real opportunity for discourse and dialogue and conversation, or it can just be a great movie about laser swords. And I think it's great that George set that canvas, but still made it a family-friendly film. And this is a family-friendly film. There's just one moment of blood. It's very, very quick in the cantina. But overall, it's just, I think that's always been part of the appeal to me, as that Star Wars is a family film with great positive messages and a sincere belief in things that you can't see, but know that there are greater intentions behind it. And as a Christian man myself, I absolutely love that.
Well, and again, you mentioned history, and you can find a whole bunch of parallels as you age. I'm sitting here, Resistance. well, throughout history and in college, I would study various types of resistance, the French resistance in World War II. And what are we trying to do in overcoming evil empires? I mean, you can just, yes, there are countless movies that are spoofs on this, and I've watched them more than I'd ever seen Star Wars itself. I don't need to, but my point is, as the student of history, yeah, it's yet another tale that you can compare and contrast to see how good is going to overcome evil. And you could drive yourself nuts, digging into the history of whether it be France or Vietnam, and more timely, as you said there in the late 70s. But I owed it to myself, and I'm just glad, like you, I appreciate your sentiment of just sitting back and absorbing it, because I think in a perfect world, I would want to watch it again, just to see what maybe I missed. But all in all, I've got other ones to watch first, I think.
Right. And, it's going to be there for you. It's just waiting for you in your Disney Plus queue. So do you have, I'm sure that if you had any questions, John and Sean and your friends would have seen it. Did you pass on this appreciation for the film to your family? And have they watched it before you did, or have they seen it with you or since?
Yeah, no. So my sons, and maybe I waited too long. My daughters are older; they're in their mid to late teens now. That's all in the eye of the beholder. But their schedules are more hectic than mine. But they all know I watched it. My sons were kind of mad that I watched it without them. So there may be some room there. I have to say that, last year I went with 16 other extended family, the in-laws. We all went to Disney World, and my sister-in-law and her husband said, we'd like to do Rise of the Resistance. And it didn't mean anything to me, but I got on it. I was absolutely amazed by the technology, understood nothing. I mean, the guys in the white suits, I knew who they were. Okay, that's neat. But from that, I could see from my sons a growing interest. Okay, what does this mean? What does this mean? And I couldn't answer them. And so I think what you'll probably hear is in not too distant future, my sons and I will sit down and watch that first one again. I will watch it, and they'll watch it for the first time.
So I can say, and of course it's a little bit different because of my Star Wars-ness. When I first showed it to Mason, I've got 3 boys, Peyton, Parker, and Mason. And Peyton and Parker, grew up loving it. And then when the Clone Wars cartoons came out, when they were live, I watched them with them. And then I introduced Mason to all of Star Wars. When he was 3, he watched the original for the first time. And he didn't know it, but I hit record on my phone and I just put it by him just to hear his commentary as he was talking as a 3-year-old. And, I don't even care if he likes Star Wars or it doesn't matter what it is. Hearing a 3-year-old just talk through a movie, just like the most wonderful gift ever. And I never would share it for public consumption, just for Mason and I and our family. But there's something so special, John, about anything. Well, I mean, this is all the great stuff. You're a great dad, great family man. But when you watch it with your boys, don't worry about your daughters, because if they go to the same school where I teach, and I know that they do, if they have my class, they pretty much don't have a choice. They're going to be watching Star Wars. So don't worry about that. I'll take care of that. Good. But the boys, if you watch with the boys, oh my gosh, dude, it's seeing Star Wars through their eyes and having dialogue is the best. I feel pretty confidently that as much as you appreciate it and enjoyed it, I think you'll love it watching with them. I really do.
You're right. That could be even better. I had the wherewithal to absorb it the last time just to watch. You're right. Sitting physically behind them as they try to take it all in, I won't be able to answer many questions. But yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Just put up the Dan signal, and I'll come over and answer any questions they have.
Very, very good. We'll just have you on standby.
Please do. So obviously next on your list is The Empire Strikes Back. Don't listen to John, Sean, those yahoos. Just come to me. Okay. I will steer you on what to see and when. So we'll do it digested. We'll do it bite-sized, little cucumber sandwiches with lightsabers, but don't, watch out for your mouth. Don't hurt the roof of your mouth.
Fair enough.
But The Empire Strikes Back was made 3 years later. It's the darkest of the first 3 films. For most people, it is the best. So when and if you do watch that film, I would sure love to have you on again to see what you thought about The Empire Strikes Back.
I have heard it's one of the most popular, so I would be remiss to think that I wouldn't be watching it. Who knows when, but yes, you'll be the first person. All right. Maybe simultaneous with a couple other guys that I did watch it.
That would be really fun. Yeah, it's I would say, even without being a Star Wars fan, it's I would put that, Toy Story 2, and The Godfather 2 as the best sequels ever made, honestly. And I'm sure you've heard that before. Before we let you go, I see your coffee's getting a little low. Do you have any questions for me about the film or anything Star Wars related that I can help you with?
Well, first off, thank you for the offer. I just have to ask, why or how does it get lost with the pronunciation? I sat in awe when I heard something about a Princess Leia. I was in awe, and I've heard people, I always thought it was an East Coast thing to hear about the Millennium Falcon versus the Falcon, and I don't know. In there's always deference
Han
to
Solo, Han Solo.
Right. And so I was always worried about knowing, but yet there were so many rudimentary things. I don't even know how to say these words. What is there a universally accepted? Are they both accepted? Are you going to be ridiculed if you're at a huge convention and you say the one of them incorrectly? That's my question.
I don't think so. I think I would love to tell you that's just a Star Wars colloquialism, depending on where you grew up in the galaxy, but that's nonsense. Okay. I think the real reason is that the actors, these are all brand new things that no one had heard of. There was no Star Wars in the zeitgeist. So they're kind of making up as they went along, like Indiana Jones famously says in Raiders of the Lost Ark. I think it's just, you don't know these words, you pronounce them how you pronounce them. And I don't know how much George would correct them on it. That I would be fascinated to go down that wormhole and see. But I think you're safe. As long as you don't call the Millennium Falcon the Enterprise, I think you're in good shape.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
Oh, so that whole live long and prosper thing isn't going to get me any secret things when I go to Galaxy's Edge next time, huh?
Well, it might. I've never understood the whole, there used to be a Star Trek rivalry. I never saw that. I never experienced that. It never really registered for me. I think they're both fun. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I'm much more of a Star Wars guy. I don't know hardly anything about Star Trek. But I appreciate anything that makes people think, makes them imagine, and provides opportunity for a wonderful community, which is something that you do with your buddies, with John and Sean on the Hyperion Hub. So again, thank you, John, so much for being on Coffee with Kenobi. Love to have you on anytime. Happy to disseminate some fun Star Wars things for you to watch without it being too intimidating. Please let everybody know where they can reach out to you on social media if they want to reach out, and let us know about the Hyperion Hub too.
Well, certainly, John would be very upset with me if I didn't go through all of the various social medias, but, I don't want to be talking for the next 5 hours as well either. But if you do search Twitter, Instagram, we're out there. Just search Hyperion Hub, and that's HYPERION Hub, and that's at Hub Hyperion on Twitter. But general searches is going to help you find it. It's a beautiful red logo with gold lettering that Sean put together for us. Gosh, over 3 years ago. We met the very first time just before 2020, and we continue to blossom, and we're so grateful to have people like you and so many wonderful guests, whether it be Marvel, whether it be the Star Wars, or even heaven forbid, Disney, historians, or even legends. We were so blessed to have so many wonderful. We are, and we have been so blessed to have so many great guests over the years, including you. And we're out there, and we've done so many things together with you, and we work together with the various museums and other collections. That, hey, you'll find us, and give us a listen, give us a like.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.